think sometimes with good intentions, mental health providers have been like, why don't we think about depression the way we think about diabetes? Like it's biological. It doesn't say, there's anything wrong with you for having diabetes. We just focus on treating it and it's really accepted and it's not shameful or anything. And I get that. And at the same time, I think more recently research has shown that kind of medical model of trying to approach mental health is flawed because it can actually increase the stigma, especially when we're talking about things like schizophrenia or other more severe and more debilitating kind of forms of mental illness.
Welcome to the Rethink, Desi Reframe series, where we challenge conventional narratives about social change, sustainability, and the South Asian community. Join me, your host, Arpita Sharma, each week as I have candid conversations with thought leaders, social entrepreneurs, researchers, activists, and creatives as we uncover the strategies, innovations, and stories behind their efforts to reshape our society. Hi, I'm Arpita, your host, and in today's episode, we are going to dive into the topic of therapy. So I've had friends and family ask me about what therapy is like, and many are curious about the experience, but unsure if it's worth trying for themselves. So today we are joined by Dr. Kavita Pallod Sekhsaria, a licensed clinical psychologist who extends her therapeutic reach across Maryland, Washington, D.C., and Virginia. Dr. Sekhsaria provides telehealth services to adults navigating life's intricate challenges. With a profound commitment to fostering healing and growth, she offers individual and couples therapy, as well as community consultation services, addressing a diverse array of concerns, including anxiety, depression, stress, identity exploration, self-worth, multicultural issues, relationship challenges, and spirituality. As we delve into our conversation with Dr. Sekhsaria, you will learn about her journey to clinical psychology, the types of strategies and approaches she uses to assist her clients, grappling with things like anxiety, depression, and the intricate journey of self-discovery. Dr. Sekhsaria discusses how she integrates cultural sensitivity and spirituality into her therapeutic sessions. And finally, we'll discuss her plans and goals for the future of her telehealth practice and ways that you can participate. So join us for this eye-opening conversation around therapy with Dr. Kavita Pallod Sekhsaria. Very nice to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much, Arpita. It's an honor to join you today.
Can you tell us about your background and experiences and what led you to become a licensed clinical psychologist?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I'm sure many of your listeners, I'm the daughter of two immigrants who, landed in Boston, had a really hard time, had me in Boston, but then moved to Houston where I spent most of my life. And, as the oldest of three siblings, I think, again, it's probably a pretty common experience of being kind of the mediator for my parents and really seeing them struggle at times with not maybe recognizing that more help was available than they recognized. And I watched so many members of my family and extended family and just the community struggle silently, I think. And it always kind of struck me that it should be easier to communicate. It should be easier to connect with each other. And that's really important too, to help adults do this so that the children in their lives are protected from the burden that comes with that, right, of trying to caregive. So I think that's a pretty formative part of my experience. And I went to the University of Texas at Austin, and I wanted to be a teacher for a long time. So I got a dual degree in psychology and education, but the sense was like, oh, I'm not going to make it in grad school. That's not for me. So I'll be a teacher, and that'll be really important, impactful work. Because, as much as I say, like, sometimes it was hard with my parents, they really filled me with the sense that, we want to serve. We want to serve people who aren't as privileged as us, and we want to just serve our community because we all benefit when we're able to put our passion behind making things better. And so teaching obviously sounded like a great way to do that. But I quickly found that I was not a great teacher. And, it was really, really hard for me at the time, but I think I found a lot of meaning in the fact that I was in a position where it was really hard for me to succeed. And it was enough that it pushed me to recognize that I really did want to go back to grad school. And I did want to get my doctorate in psychology and be a psychologist, which is something, I took AP psychology in high school, and it was my favorite class. And I just thought all the principles were so interesting, but it took me, a little bit to come back. Even though I majored in psychology in undergrad, I didn't, apply to grad school until I really decided that teaching wasn't for me. But I'm really blessed. I got into, this ID program at Rutgers Graduate School of Applied and Professional Psychology, and got to meet, these amazing leaders in multicultural psychology, and the idea of like really understanding what it means to use these principles to help communities that have both been underserved for a long time, but also like just hold so much stigma against this idea of mental health care. And I got to write my dissertation on Hindu Indian American conceptions of mental health, because I really felt like, in some faith traditions, there's still this tradition or culture around, you talk to someone, maybe it's an imam, maybe it's a rabbi, maybe it's, in confession or whatever it may be, but even if it's not with the mental health care provider, there's an emphasis on taking care of your well-being in a way that I felt like, why don't we have any of this in our community? Am I just missing something? And so being able to explore, do Hindu texts say anything about mental health? Like, do they advise anything on how to deal with the stress and depression and, everything else that we struggle with now? And so I found that really meaningful. I found, interviewing some, spiritual leaders who, most of them were so lovely and saying like, I know my limitations, you know your limitations. We need to work together to serve our community better, because of course we see a lot of suffering. But of course I talked to some who were like, to be honest, I would never go to a stranger. I would never tell anyone who came to me to go to a stranger. Like, our community needs to be enough. And so doing the work to unpack, like, how do you approach that type of attitude, and how do you show people that, going to therapy isn't, some admission of weakness, and not just weakness on an individual part, but a weakness in family, community, support, but rather an opportunity to say, like, I really want to grow. And I know I'm not meeting my dreams for myself. I'm not meeting my potential, and I want to work through whatever those barriers are to be the version of myself that I deserve, and like, my whole community can benefit from too. And so, I was at a group practice for a while, but with COVID decided it made sense to like really create my own practice so I could actually very much focus on serving the people that I went to grad school to serve. And it's been really fulfilling, and it's been really meaningful to go down that path and be here today where I can say, yeah, I serve a lot of South Asian people, and like, there's so much diversity, of course, even when you say South Asian, and there's a lot of religious diversity in my clients too, but there's a sense that like, it's okay to talk about how spirituality impacts how we're doing, and it's okay to be in a space and still feel like we're battling with what it says about us. And I'm really enjoying it. I've been really enjoying it. And it's really fun to be able to share that part of the journey here too.
It's a lot of work to go from a place of feeling like you've ended up in a position or doing work where you felt like that was going to be the area for you, and then coming to the recognition that layer doesn't fit, and then moving to and like pursuing what is calling you. I also just it's so humbling to hear you share about the amazing kind of work that you have been able to do, and it's also very inspiring. I know, like as someone who is kind of in a data analyst position at work, it's I cannot imagine like the level of kind of the level of effort and dedication it takes to like build something like that from the ground up, and to feel that pride and creating something like that is really wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you for your kindness, of course, and just reiterate the point that like it happens even to like I feel like I was just very successful like in high school. Nothing was ever hard. Breezed through college, and then boom, like my first like real taste of like I am not good at this and I am not cut out to do this was as a teacher, which like, you know, and in our community, I have to be honest, a lot of people are like, are you selling yourself short? Like, why are you being a teacher? I thought you were pretty smart. Like, you know, isn't that what, you know, XYZ stereotype does? But you know, I really took seriously like the fact that I was doing what felt like more harm than good by staying in that position. And it took humility, it took a lot of tears, it took a lot of conversations, you know, with family to be able to say like I'm not good at this. I think I'm capable of doing things I'm good at, and so I'm quitting, which is, you know, that word is really tough in my family, but it was part of my journey, and I'm really happy I was able to find my way through that.
Yeah. And I think it may provide hope to folks who are in the audience who may be struggling and have gone through similar experiences, or are going through them currently.
I really hope so too.
Yeah. So kind of getting back to your current work, in case those listeners need someone to talk to, you offer therapy for a wide range of kind of issues, including anxiety, depression, stress, and identity exploration. Could you share some of the common strategies or approaches that you use to help clients with these types of concerns?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I come from an approach to therapy where I'm trying to create a space where people can really understand how they're feeling and also understand where that's coming from. And so sometimes part of the work is exploring early relationships, our relationships with, you know, important people in our lives, but also our relationships to emotions and how that's evolved. And I found that as we build our insight into kind of the why and where is this coming from, we feel more and more empowered to make sure that our decisions are actually bringing our life in line with our values. And so much of the work that I do and that my clients do, right, in the space I try to facilitate with them is really centered around understanding, and with understanding comes this need for, you know, really being kind to ourselves and really being fair to ourselves, because, you know, I think in our society today, especially I think in our, you know, microcosm of it, we've taught ourselves that it's so important to be our biggest critic. It's so important to be so critical of ourselves. And to be fair, there's there's something to that. It does help us grow to some extent, to be able to reflect on what we're doing and to want to grow and to want to do better. But we also get to this point where we go past like a healthy level of reflection to being so mean to ourselves, so being so unkind to ourselves. And that can create so much of the depression and anxiety that we see. And when we learn to like let go of the sense that, no, I have to treat myself this way, I have to talk to myself this way, or I'm going to languish, or I won't succeed, or I just won't be myself, we find that, like, we can flourish and we can thrive and we can be kind to ourselves and still reach, all of our potential. It doesn't only come from beating ourselves up, and so many times the conversation is just around like, you wouldn't treat a friend like that. And it's not because you don't care about your friend succeeding, it's because it doesn't work. And so when we can recognize, like, that adage that, when you have a hammer, the whole world is full of nails, like, let's just put down the hammer for a second and realize you have a couple of other tools in your belt that you can use to approach your life and to approach yourself. So, it's very cheesy, but I think a lot of my work is teaching people to be kind and fair to themselves and their journey to, give that out to the world too.
Yeah. And I can only imagine how difficult a task that is. Especially, I think, coming from within the South Asian community, when you grow up in an environment like that where those kind of being tough on yourself is the only thing that has allowed you to be successful, kind of, and in the circumstances that you've been raised in, it's very difficult to then be able to take a step back and see kind of all of the ravages internally that has created for you, and be able to like assess and move past that. I remember, I think when my brother passed away, and he had passed away from a genetic terminal illness, and I remember kind of up until that point, I had always kind of I'd always put a lot of pressure on myself to be successful and to push myself no matter what the circumstances were. And it wasn't until I really started to understand and recognize the meaning of that loss, that I understood that there was also a young child inside me that was crying for attention that I never gave that child. And it's only in like recognizing that and coming to the wholeness of and self-acceptance, that I think I've been able to I have this desire to want to cultivate that. But as someone who is kind of doing that work, it's really inspiring to see you trying to cultivate that wholeness in others.
Well, thank you. And I'm so sorry for your loss. I thought that sounds really like it was probably really tough in your journey and finding meaning, and the cruelty of the universe is also really, really profound and inspiring.
I think we all go through our share of experiences like that in one way or another.
Yeah.
But I'd love to jump back into kind of, we delved a little bit earlier into this idea of like addressing kind of the issues within the South Asian community, but how kind of multicultural those issues could even be. And I know that multicultural issues and spirituality are a big part of the focus of your practice. So How do you integrate that cultural sensitivity and spirituality into your individual therapy sessions to support your clients effectively?
Yeah, when I do my intake, I ask a lot of questions. Some of them are like, how are you sleeping? How are you eating? What substances are you using? But I also ask, hey, are you religious? Are you spiritual? And I think it's really important because I'm trying to make it clear that it's not taboo to talk about spirituality. However, it impacts, our well-being and our journeys because just, in my training and so many times kind of um, engaging in the psychological space, I just sometimes get the sense that for no understandable reason, there's a friction between mental health care providers and spiritual care providers, and those are separate lanes that need to be separate, but that's not how we work, right? We're complex and tangled individuals, and therapy needs to be a space where it's okay to come in and grapple with I feel like, I grew up understanding this, but I'm feeling this. And what does that mean? And what do I want? Or, you know, any piece of that should be okay. This is a huge part of my healing, actually, but I haven't been able to access it. And I don't know why. Of course, it's not, I'm not, I haven't read every religious text. I can't, quote scripture to my clients. And I don't think that would be fair either. But I do try to make it okay as much as they want or as little as they want to engage with how their relationship with faith or with God or with spirituality is impacting their journey of growth. Because I've just found that for a lot of people, it's really relevant. And yeah, I have many clients who it never, comes up after me asking that one question to. And then I've had other clients who, we've really engaged deeply in just unpacking their understanding of this one aspect or this one thing about how they're understanding faith. And it also multiculturalism is so interesting because so many of my clients were I am very much looking for a South Asian therapist, and it's because I know I'm just going to feel more understood, and I'm just going to feel more ready to be open. And after that first conversation, it's we're just talking about work and friends and relationships. And it's it's not central. It's not I'm feeling bullied because I'm Indian. And so that's part of our therapy, or, it's, this central aspect of our culture that I'm working with. But it's just this sense of feeling safe and feeling understood, whatever the issues are. And recognizing, right, that because I'm working with this community, there are some themes that really come up. So like I said, a lot of the work ends up being around being kind to ourselves, letting go of this need to be really critical, grappling with the privilege that we have based on what, so much of the time our parents, engage in these sacrifices to give us. And what do we do with that privilege and responsibility? And yeah, the immense pressure sometimes we feel as a model minority, and just kind of cultural expectation within our community, outside of our community. Yeah.
There's an incredible amount of value in being able to connect with someone who is similar to you, who can just listen and be kind of part of your experience, or witness kind of the challenges of your existence and be a third party to it. So I personally also have a South Asian therapist, and I've seen tremendous value from being able to have her in my life. So I want to say that like just from my own experience, it's a huge value, being able to have someone who can really counsel you and be there as a therapist, for your needs. Are there any specific challenges that you've encountered in your work helping to support individuals with their mental health? I think both in like kind of building up the work that you've done on your own, um, and then also kind of on a daily basis when you're interacting with clients.
Yeah, Arpita, that's a really, really great question. I think the stigma continues to be, one of the biggest hurdles to making people feel like it's okay to seek therapy, and that it doesn't say anything negative about, again, themselves, their support system, family, friends, etc. And it's of course obviously a really, really tough cookie to crack. Like, how do you help people get past that stigma? But one of the things I found really helpful is, I think sometimes with good intentions, mental health providers have been like, why don't we think about depression the way we think about diabetes? Like, it's biological. It doesn't say, there's anything wrong with you for having diabetes. We just focus on treating it, and it's really accepted and it's not shameful or anything. And I get that. And at the same time, I think more recently research has shown that that kind of medical model of trying to approach mental health is flawed, because it can actually increase the stigma, especially when we're talking about things like schizophrenia or other more severe and more debilitating kind of forms of mental illness. And so instead, I think the metaphor that really helps is like, listen, we're going to think about depression or anxiety or, any mental health illness, I should say, the way that we think about an injury to like our leg, right? And we get physical therapy. And physical therapy and psychotherapy actually have a lot of parallels because, it's not an admission that we're weak to go to physical therapy. It's a desire to grow stronger. And when you go to your physical therapist, like, it's not a cop out. It's not like, oh, hey, physical therapist, you fix me. Because I've heard this so often that people are like, therapy is a cop out, and it only comes from people who have never been in therapy because they don't recognize that you are doing the work, right? Your physical therapist will tell you what to do. They will support you. They will try to prevent you from further injuring or aggravating your injury, right? It is a support. It is really important to have a really qualified professional in that role. But your therapist isn't like working your muscle for you. They're encouraging you to do that work. They're holding safety. They're holding, a targeted space to help you understand, like, where do you need to do the work? Where do you need to strengthen those muscles? But it's on you. And so, of course, I'm not even talking about how medication plays in, which is important in thinking about that. But I think I found that the physical therapy to psychotherapy metaphor can be really helpful to a lot of people in our community in recognizing that therapy is a space to grow, which, there's not so much stigma around that. We all think that's pretty great.
That's a really thoughtful and powerful illustration of what therapy can do. Illustrates like the value of it differently than a lot of the text and a lot of the social media work that I've seen around comparing depression to something like diabetes. So thank you for sharing that. I think that is really valuable in terms of thinking about it. What advice would you give to someone who is considering seeking therapy for the first time? And what steps can individuals take to make the most of a therapy experience with someone like you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish this wasn't true, but it can be really hard to navigate finding a therapist. At this point in time, unfortunately, the demand is still higher than the supply. It can feel really confusing to navigate, like, oh, does someone accept my insurance? Like, what is the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist and a social worker and an LCPC and a, LMSW, all of that. And I won't go into the distinctions in different types of providers and with insurance, the best thing is to just call them and ask about your benefits, and then call the provider directly rather than fully depending on databases like Psychology Today to be accurate. But once you get to a place where you found a profile that someone speaks to you, and someone who's qualified, more than anything, qualified to work with you and your particular concerns, your presenting problem, if you will, I think people should know that you should really give a lot of credence to your gut, because therapy is a feeling space, and only when you are feeling safe and heard are you going to be able to dive into yourself in the way that you probably, even if you don't want to, need to, if you're considering, engaging in this process. So trust your gut, trust how you're feeling, know that like you're not gonna hurt your therapist's feelings, and even if you do, that's not your problem if you decide after a session that you want to move. And I know that it takes a lot of mental energy and all energy to have to feel like you're starting over again or doing another intake or anything like that. But I just hope it helps to hear like it's okay to do that. This is a really intimate relationship, and you don't want to marry the first person that you date. So you might, but you want to give it some time before you make sure that the right person and your therapist is maybe not as heavy a commitment, but it is a really intimate commitment. So you really want to give yourself the chance to make sure that you're feeling really comfortable. Because, to answer the second part of your question, like, what do you need to do in order to make the most of therapy? You've got to reflect, and you've got to make sure that you're actually like really giving yourself a chance to feel what's coming up and then to understand what's coming up. And it takes safety, but also your intention and your willingness to be vulnerable in order to do that.
Even for you, as like you've kind of shared during this conversation, you have certain focus areas that you have. And there are a variety of therapists who also have specific focus areas that might be valuable for those who are reaching out. So if there's folks who are who really need like grief specific counseling or couples counseling as you provide, I think those folks specifically can provide spaces for that as well.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you expanding on that, because, I think I get the question often of like, do I need a South Asian therapist? And like, if you force me to answer in a yes or no, I'm going to say no. Like, I think there's lovely providers out there, which they may not share your experience, but they share an ability to understand and to be able to explore and help you do the work for yourself, as much as I value being able to provide that experience for so many. But like what you can't compromise on is someone having experience and expertise in your particular concern. And sure, if you're like, I think I'm depressed or I think I'm anxious, then a lot of providers have a lot of experience with that. But, if you're dealing with an eating disorder, I implore you, don't go to a South Asian therapist just because they're a South Asian therapist if they don't have experience with that, because it can be really tough. And same for, bipolar or ADHD or whatever. And to be fair, we have wonderful, wonderful South Asian therapists who have niches in all of these. But I know that sometimes, based on where we are, our financial position, our insurance, our options get limited. And, in an ideal world, I'd say, you're going to find the perfect therapist every time. But when you can't, because that's a reality, remember that finding someone um, with expertise in what you're dealing with, who you feel a good fit with, and who you feel heard by, because there are South Asian therapists that you just won't feel heard by. It happens. It's true. That's the most important thing.
It can be difficult when you're faced with that hurdle, and maybe that also creates that additional barrier too of oh, I can't find someone South Asian, and so I'm not going to try. But choosing to go after that specialist that might be kind of the best for understanding your issue might also be really valuable in those instances. Okay, so I'd love to end with asking you, can you share any future plans or goals that you have for your telehealth practice and how you envision continuing to support the mental health needs of our community?
Absolutely. I love this question because it's always fun to talk about, dreams and goals. So I'm working on something called Brown Couple Therapy, and our goal is to create a retreat for South Asian couples who, may be dating, maybe engaged, maybe actively planning a wedding, or have been married and with kids, like anywhere along the spectrum. But it is geared towards couples where one or both partners are South Asian, and where South Asian culture plays a role in the dynamic of their relationship. I love doing couples work in my practice, in the more traditional, once a week or, twice a month kind of setting. But I also know that it can be a really profound experience to take a dedicated weekend and to do like a big chunk of work together, to work on your relationship. And, it doesn't have to mean that you're coming because it feels like something is wrong, but rather because you have a sense that you have this opportunity to grow in your communication and, more than anything, your friendship with your partner, right? A lot of times life can just throw so much at us that we feel like we've lost a little bit of our friendship in the name of, XYZ thing. And so this retreat is really geared for couples to be able to have an educational workshop type of space to do really fun things to reconnect with their partner, and also gain some concrete skills for me, the facilitator, in strengthening their relationship. So I'm really excited about Brown Couple Therapy. I really hope we can get it off the ground to, provide this space for a lot of couples. And, aside from that, I'm going to keep having my door open to trying, serve more people than I'm able to right now, and make therapy, very accessible, beyond the stigma that a lot of people hold. I would love to keep working with spiritual spaces where people may otherwise go for some help, to see that there's even more support possible, and there's even more of a sense that people can get help and they don't have to suffer for the sake of stuff.
Can we link some of the details for those couple sessions and share them out with folks, so if they're interested, they have an opportunity to attend? I am so thankful that you were able to join us today.
Thank you so much, Arpita. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too. And I hope folks in our audience did too, and they connect with you. And we'll link your details in our show notes.